Okay, let's just jump right into this explainer. We're untangling the 2026 Iran nuclear standoff. And if you've been tracking this, you already know we are squarely in the most volatile phase we've seen in over a decade. Today, we're cutting right through the political noise. We're going to look at exactly why the usual playbooks have totally stalled out and why a really fragile, highly technical bridge might literally be our only way out of this. To make sense of this whole shebang, we've broken the analysis down into 5 quick chapters. The perfect storm, the deterrence paradox, the diplomatic maze, the verification bridge, and finally, what happens next.
All right, part 1, the perfect storm. Immediate and high stakes.
The absolute urgency of this situation really boils down to a terrifyingly short window, 1 to 3 months. That is the estimated nuclear breakout time right now. And honestly, some intelligence assessments are warning it could even be compressed under a week. Now, obviously, actual weaponization, processing the material, building the device, putting it on a missile delivery system, that still takes another 6 to 18 months. But crossing that initial threshold to get the fissile material, we are dangerously close to that line. And things have escalated so incredibly fast over the last year. Think about it. We started with indirect talks in Oman back in April 2025. Just 2 months later, boom, the geopolitical landscape totally fractures with the Israel-Iran military strikes what everyone is calling the 12-day war. That kinetic action basically shattered diplomacy, leading to totally stalled talks in early 2026. But then we saw a massive shift. April 2026. Historic, direct, face-to-face talks between the US and Iran in Islamabad, entirely facilitated by Pakistan. Moving right along to Section 2, the deterrence paradox, military action limits. So, during that 12-day war, Israel's targeted strikes were obviously meant to smash Iran's nuclear infrastructure. But operationally, they actually severed the IAEA's continuous monitoring cameras. Bombing those facilities created this massive information blackout. And in the nuclear world, an information blackout is an absolute nightmare because uncertainty just breeds worst-case assumptions, which, you guessed it, fuels even more escalation. Here is the crux of the deterrence paradox. Military strikes can degrade concrete buildings, but they cannot erase scientific knowledge. Sure, surface facilities at Natanz took a hit, but the deeply fortified underground plant at Fordow, completely intact. The engineering know-how is perfectly preserved. And even wilder, right before the strikes, somewhere between 440 and 540 kilograms of highly enriched uranium was secretly relocated to undisclosed sites. So, intelligence agencies are essentially trying to solve a high-stakes puzzle with half the pieces totally missing. And parked right at the center of this intelligence vacuum is the fact that Iran is enriching uranium to 60% purity. Now, Tehran says, hey, this is just for medical and scientific research. But non-proliferation experts will tell you that 60% enrichment has virtually no real commercial or civilian utility. By mastering the 60% level, Iran has basically conquered the absolute hardest, most time-consuming part of making fuel. They are sitting right on the edge of weapons-grade capability. Which brings us to Section 3, the diplomatic maze, negotiation stalemates. At the very heart of this diplomatic maze is a classic, frustrating sequencing dilemma. Who blinks first? Washington wants what we'll call the indefinite deal. They want a permanent, verified dismantling of the enrichment program, and they'll only trickle out sanctions relief based on strictly verified milestones. Tehran, on the flip side, demands their sovereign rights. They point to their rights under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, reject permanent limits, and demand upfront, legally guaranteed sanctions relief before they even think about making irreversible nuclear concessions. It's a total standoff. Breaking that intense logjam required a really surprising catalyst. After talks kept failing in Europe, Pakistan actually stepped up. Leveraging their historical ties with Tehran and their strategic partnership with Washington, Islamabad managed to pull off a marathon 21-hour direct session in April 2026. 21 hours straight. It was the very first face-to-face sit-down between the US and Iran since 2015. It didn't produce a final signed agreement, but it proved that neutral, non-Western settings could successfully keep these vital channels from completely dying. But why do these broader deals just keep failing? Well, it comes down to 4 major structural roadblocks. First, that clash between the indefinite deal and sovereign rights we just talked about. Second, the endless sequencing dispute over who moves first on sanctions. Third is what we call scope creep. The US and Israel want to bring ballistic missiles and regional proxies into the mix, but Iran refuses to talk about anything except the nuclear file. And fourth,
Ambiguity itself is actually a strategic asset for Tehran. Sitting right on the threshold without crossing it gives them immense leverage.
All right, on to Section 4, the verification bridge, technical path forward.
If diplomacy is stuck and military strikes just blind us, verification is literally the hero of our story. We're talking about incredibly precise tech here: gamma spectroscopy, continuous camera feeds at the centrifuge cascades, environmental sampling. The point of this tech isn't to punish anyone. The point is to establish a cold, hard baseline. When political trust is at absolute zero, verification steps in as the functional equivalent of trust. It lets both sides make phased concessions based on verifiable data, not empty promises. But, and this is absolutely crucial to grasp, you have to understand the strict limits of this tech. Look at what verification can do. It's amazing at tracking known materials, giving early warning of a breakout, and preserving diplomatic off-ramps by changing the breakout timeline from days back to months. But look at what it absolutely cannot do. A camera cannot measure political intent. A sensor cannot magically reveal a hidden weapons design lab or an entirely undeclared underground facility. It measures compliance, not strategy. Ultimately, the technical measures still need a political framework to actually function.
So, Section 5, what happens next? 3 potential scenarios. Based on the intelligence and the current diplomatic trajectory, this global crisis is heading down one of 3 specific pathways. We're going to walk through them, building from the absolute nightmare scenario, moving up to a middle ground pause, and ending with the best case resolution. Let's start with the worst case: total verification collapse. If IAEA access is permanently blocked, Iran could easily just resume 60% plus enrichment down in those deeply fortified facilities like Fordo. That would almost certainly trigger a massive wave of kinetic military strikes from the US or Israel. And the fallout wouldn't just be regional. We'd be looking at the potential closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Think about that. Roughly a fifth of the world's daily oil consumption flows right through there. Shutting that down would trigger an absolute shockwave through the global economy. Now, a far more likely near-term outcome is the middle case, an interim confidence-building agreement. This basically builds on the structural template Pakistan just set up. In this scenario, enrichment gets capped at 5% for civilian use only. The IAEA inspectors are allowed back into declared sites to reset the baseline, and in exchange, Iran gets partial sanctions relief, mostly in humanitarian sectors. The whole point of this? It buys a 6 to 12-month negotiating window. It hits the pause button on the crisis so the world can breathe. The absolute best-case scenario, the holy grail here, is a comprehensive verification regime. This would take immense, almost unprecedented political courage from all sides. We're talking about a modified additional protocol with highly intrusive, 24/7 continuous real-time monitoring everywhere. The current stockpiles of highly enriched uranium would actually be shipped out to a third country under IAEA seal. In return, Iran would get phased, legally ironclad sanctions relief. It's the dream outcome, but it requires overcoming a mountain of ingrained distrust. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one unavoidable reality that dictates everything we've talked about today. Time is not neutral. Every single month that passes without IAEA inspectors on the ground critically increases the breakout risk. It chips away at the credibility of global institutions, and the window for diplomacy slams a little further shut. The alternative to this verification-based approach isn't just a quiet status quo. It is perpetual, incredibly dangerous crisis management. So here is the final profound thought to chew on regarding the future of global security. The technical solutions exist. The neutral mediators, like Pakistan, have built the bridge. The question is no longer whether verification can actually bridge the gap between deterrence and diplomacy. The real question is, are our leaders brave enough to walk across it?